You're listening to Gender, a Wider Lens.
I'm Stella O'Malley, a psychotherapist in Ireland.
And I'm Sasha Ayad, an adolescent therapist in the United States. Since 2016, my practice has been exclusively dedicated to gender questioning teens and families impacted by gender dysphoria.
I also work with gender questioning teenagers, and I facilitated support meetings for families and individuals who've been impacted by gender issues.
We're curious about the concept of gender and how it's unfolding in the wider culture.
Join us as we look at gender through a wider lens.
Hi, Stella, we're back.
Oh, we're back in town. The girls are back in town.
Yeah.
It feels great to be back. Oh my God. And when we were finishing our last season, I was wrung out. I was like, bye, Sasha. I'm so weak. And now I'm like back in with loads of ideas. Oh my God. If ever, the mental health lesson of take a break sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you a world of good. My God, this break did me a great.
For sure. I'm so curious about, I know a little bit about how you spent your time, but I bet our audience is, so maybe we can talk about what did you do? First of all, it's not like we were off of work, right?
God, no.
But we had a break from the podcast and we got little kind of pieces of respite, I guess.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I went to America and the land of dreams, of hope and dreams, and we did the retreat. We'll talk about that later. I've been doing quite a lot. I'm definitely getting to a place where I have to start choosing more judiciously what to do, because every single day I'm being asked really interesting concepts and things, projects, initiatives, and I want to do them all. I remember Oliver Burkeman in his brilliant book, 4,000 Weeks, he said, you have to say no to things you like, because if you try to do it all, you'll just get wrung out. So I am having a very much a moment of understanding that I need to learn to be more judicious in what I say yes to. Having said yes to too many things. But I did go to France with the kids, went to Paris with my sister and her boy and my two kids. And my girl is 14, so she brought with her another 14-year-old to soften the blow. And that was a very good idea. And it was a very last minute idea. She kind of texted me, my daughter, a couple of days before we were due to go. And she said, I don't want to go on your silly holiday. And I was like, my silly holiday? My silly holiday? It's costing me a fortune.
Oh my God.
I was bringing my kids to Paris. And then I said, after I had my fit, I said, no, actually, I'll get somebody to go with her. I said, do you want to bring a friend? And she said, yeah, brilliant. It's going to be the best time ever.
God, it went from a stupid holiday that she doesn't want to go on to the best time ever.
In a half an hour.
Yeah.
And it was very intense, very, very busy, and really good. Just really good. Just being in a different place with your kids and watching your kids kind of navigate the new world, the different world. It really is so good to get away. What did you do, Sasha?
Well, I also am just kind of being more mindful about my time and making sure that I save energy for things that really, really matter. And so there's a couple of big things, I guess, that I'm working on right now. I've been having a bit of a writing crisis, as you know, because, anyone who's listening, Stella is a prolific writer. She's written several books. She writes all the time for publications, and Stella, you describe it as your happy place. You're like, oh, my kids know when I'm writing, I'm in my happy place. Yeah. And for me, writing is quite the opposite, or it has been, right? And I've been trying to figure out why. I even posted this on Twitter, I hate writing. Does anyone have tips for me? And I got all kinds of responses. And then I found a book called Becoming an Academic Writer by Patricia Goodson. And I've been reading it. And the number one thing that I think for me is relevant here is that she said, there's a certain mindset that people have, and it's a kind of black and white mindset. It's fixed. Either people are good writers or they're not good writers. But in reality, writing is a skill and a habit that you have to develop. And it's not like you're going to sit down and your draft number one is going to be the most perfect thing. It's actually a slow, iterative process. And she has incredible strategies and tips and exercises. And so anybody who knows me knows I love kind of like self-improvement projects. So if I can frame this as a skill I'm developing, it's easy. It's a piece of cake. And so I've been writing every single day. It's like now part of my daily routine. I have a crazy schedule where everything is regimented.
I do.
So I'm actually really enjoying the process, and I'm thrilled because I would like to include more writing projects in my work. And so work-wise, that's something I've been really spending my energy on, and I've shifted the way I think about it, and it's been tremendously helpful. So that's another kind of testament to the power of mindset, which is really weird for me how drastic that shifts things.
I agree with everything you said about writing. There's some brilliant books out there. I know Stephen King wrote a beautiful book about writing.
Oh,
he did, a really lovely book. And so did Steven Pinker. Isn't he the psychologist? He wrote a lovely book. And there's so many lovely books on writing that are lovely to read, if you follow me, as well as I don't know the one you're talking about, but I do know your writing. And every time I've read it, I thought, isn't it strange that she finds it hard? Because she's clearly very good at it. And anybody who's listening to this podcast will think, isn't it strange? Because you, Sasha, are clearly so verbally brilliant. It feels shocking.
I'll tell you what
shocking
happens.
that's what, you must.
What happens is I sit down and my mind goes it's almost like I imagine a spider web, and I'm in the middle, and my brain has branched out to 1,000 directions that I could take a written piece. And then I get overwhelmed and stuck. And so I think it's the psychological burden of writing much more than I think I'm a terrible writer. It's the process of writing is so taxing mentally and psychologically and intellectually. And I think I need more structure, and specifically with writing that involves referencing sources. Patricia Goodson in this book talks about how, like, if you're doing research for a piece, you can highlight and use sticky notes and, put words in the margins, but then you have a stack of resources that are disorganized. And so she has a system of like how to take notes while you're doing your research in a spreadsheet.
Brilliant
so
idea.
That you can easily reference it, and you don't have to dig through a 300-page book to look for that single quote. And so for me, I like systems. So for me, if I'm going to embark on another academic project, I'm going to try to use this matrix spreadsheet idea, which will hopefully cut out that overwhelming feeling of, oh, I remember reading something, but where did I see that? That process is
hellish.
brutal.
Well, I'm much simpler minded than you. I use a fairly simple that, like, if I, when I get the reference, I just stick it in an end note. Like, I press end note and then I put the link in, and there it is. You know what I mean? I don't have matrices and stuff like that. Now, far be it from me to get in the way of you in a spreadsheet.
Not to get in the way of my spreadsheet.
Me and Sasha, I think the two of us, we've had such an extraordinary year and a bit together, year and a half really, of realizing how different we are. And then we're astonishingly different. Like, we'd be hilarious. Talk about the odd couple if we married, would be a disaster. We'd be married on Monday, divorced by Tuesday. But like, we land very similar places psychologically. We land
incredible. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So here we are. So I mean, the rest of my time, my mom came to visit, and I've updated some decor in my office. So it's been nice. I'm trying to create an environment which is conducive to calm, mindful writing. So I'm really focused on this. I'm really trying to build the context for writing.
That's lovely.
So here I am. Yeah.
One other thing from my new guru, Oliver Berkman, was he said, because I think he's great, he said, do the thing you want to do first in the day. You know what I mean? Basically, you'll always have emails to answer. You'll always have difficult things to do.
Yeah.
Do the thing you want to do first. If you want to be an artist, do art first. If you want to be a writer, do art right. Yeah. Do that. It's so true.
It's so true.
You'll get to the other stuff because you have to. But if you try and finish everything in a world that is never finished, you'll never get to your thing. So you have to
and
do it
you
first.
won't have the energy for those kind of passion-driven
No.
activities. You need
Yeah.
that morning time. I totally
Yeah.
agree. I
Yeah.
love that.
So do I.
And of course, while you were traveling to America, I so happened to meet you in America for our
Well,
first retreat. Do you think we should explain what is wider lens first? I know we're
yeah,
missing
yeah.
33.33% of us, but what is
Very,
wider lens consulting to just kind of launch it
well,
into the world here?
we are missing a very vital third, which would be the lovely Lisa Marciano, but she's very much part of us because we have our very active WhatsApp group, so we're never off it, and the three of us chat a lot during the day. It's funny because there's an 8-hour difference between me and you, and between Lisa's in the middle, and we started it how long ago? A year ago, and the idea was to kind of bring a nuanced and a complex and an understanding about gender to different people, be it parents or organizations or schools. And our first big event really was this retreat. And it was
Yes.
so moving and profound
Yes.
and I really was impacted by it. It was extraordinary. It was at the end of March, and we didn't know. I kind of knew it was going to be amazing, but I didn't know how it would look. I didn't know what it
Yeah.
would be like.
Yeah.
So what we did was we advertised a few months beforehand. We just out to parents, might you be interested in a retreat somewhere near Washington, in and around these dates, show your interest. And immediately there was interest. It was kind of obvious that
Yes.
there was interest. And so we thought we'd take the plunge. I think we were nervous, weren't we? We wanted to get it right. We knew
Yeah.
these parents needed help, and we wanted to get it right.
Definitely. I know for myself, I was pretty nervous in that I've never done anything like this. You know, you're very used to giving a lot of talks and lectures, which our retreat was not a series of lectures. So we can kind of talk about what it actually was. But I am not. I'm not really, that's not my comfort zone. And
Yeah,
so spending, 3 or 4 days in one building with a set of parents and um, just kind of witnessing and holding space for all of the complexity and the emotions and the questions and the intense desire to help their children. I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to deliver, and also just, wow, what an intense kind of interpersonal experience that would be. And it was. And it was
yeah,
also one of the most moving,
yeah.
incredible experiences of my professional life. I
Me too.
felt like, wow, we are creating space for and witnessing the absolutely most profound set of experiences. And we're watching this bizarre psychological experiment on children unfolding. And for some reason, the entire medical profession is completely neglecting their job. Of
Whoa.
course, we know so many brilliant physicians who are speaking up about this, but as a whole, we just kept hearing story after story of parents taking their very distressed, complicated children to doctors and psychologists and having those professionals absolutely make the most brash, irresponsible, and bizarre recommendations.
Yeah. It was shocking. It started, let's say, on the Sunday afternoon, and we had a registration, and people were trickling in.
Oh, yes.
And it was so moving right from the beginning. We were just the three of us, myself, you, and Lisa Marciano. We were nervous, just, let's see how
Yeah.
this goes. And
We had our clipboards at the registration
yeah.
table, and we were just
And
ready to check people in.
almost immediately, like, parents came in and they turned to us and they knew us. And they
Yeah.
name checked our podcast so often it would make your head spin. And I was really moved. They kind of, "Stella, Sasha, Lisa," they knew us, and they felt
Yeah.
so warm towards us. There was such warmth. And I suppose I really recognized the value of our podcast. I really recognized, wow, people are literally listening, and it's really helping them in a
Yes.
when I say literally listening, they're listening deeply. They're
Yes,
really
yes,
listening.
yes.
And
Right.
and so that was just, I found that it's such a lovely moment when they came in, and there was so much, it felt like meeting old friends. That's what it felt
Yeah.
like. And they knew
Yeah.
us, and they were just
Yeah.
so warm towards us. I thought that was beautiful. And then did we have something to eat? And then we went for that, because we had a phenomenal experience on the Sunday evening that I'll
Yes.
never forget.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Sunday evening, we had about 35 parents there, if I'm remembering correctly,
Roughly,
and we
yeah.
thought it was important as the first time that everybody got together in the same room, that everyone just have a chance to tell their story.
Yeah.
And it became clear, first of all, that there was, interestingly, a huge variety of experiences represented there,
Yeah.
very different backgrounds of these
Yeah.
parents, all united in the concern that we love our kids so much. Something unusual is happening to our kid, and we can't find any reasonable help. I mean, that was like the uniting theme in my eyes.
Yeah.
And they shared just everybody's situation, how their kid became, struggling with gender, how they got wrapped up in this thing. Some parents had children who had medicalized already, sometimes rather rapidly after taking on a new identity. And then other parents who were 7 years in, just still kind of holding this tension, exhausted. I mean, there were so many different experiences. Um, and
Yeah.
it was so powerful, the kind of emotional output, especially because for a lot of parents, they had literally never told anybody what was going on. So this was the first time they felt safe enough to say what they honestly felt and what they were concerned about.
And it felt very special, almost holy, that they were each getting a chance to say their piece. And we knew we'd ran on. We knew that we'd kind of designated a smaller amount. And then it was quite obvious something special is happening here. Something
Yeah.
very special is happening here. And only a fool would intrude upon this. We just need to let this evolve as each
Yes.
parent told their story. And each story was a kind of a tragedy in and of itself. It was a novel of its own, if you follow me. It had its own start, middle, and end. So many parents were so hard on themselves, self-recriminating, talking about their input and the love these parents had for their children, and their genuine, authentic desire to do right by the kid. And
Yeah.
that they just genuinely didn't think that medical transition would be the answer to this specific problem. That these
Yeah.
kids, like you said, a multitude of different diagnoses, a multitude of issues, and being dismissed so badly and being treated so badly by so many. And, when the first person said it, it's like, okay, that's awful. Second person, they went into their story, oh, that's awful. Third, fourth. Then myself and yourself started looking at each other going, what the hell is going on? Like,
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
parents are being treated so badly by so many different professionals who really were there to help. That felt very frightening. And then it moved into a bigger place where these parents need to say this story. Like you said, they've never said it before. And this is a really special occasion where parents are meeting. And, I'm there from Ireland, and I'm very conscious of the political sensitivities in America. But I remember at one stage, one person saying they were some sort of redneck, from some area, and the other person said, "Oh, I'm the Liberal from the same area," and then laughed at each other.
Yeah.
It was a
Yes.
complete, and it really reminded me of, let's say, Northern Ireland politics, where you go to a place and we move beyond our politics. It's like we both love our both love our children, and honestly,
Right.
you do you, I do me, and there was such genuine warmth between people who really were like very different politically and
Yes,
very different
people who
socially.
never would have interacted, like they never would have just met by happenstance in their daily
They would
lives.
have walked away from each other. They would
Yeah,
not have been in the same milieu at all. And they were totally warm. I thought there was so much warmth from the parents to each other as they all realized, as it emerged that Sunday night, it emerged that this had been done to their families, that their family
yeah,
had the biggest crime any of them had was maybe having vulnerable children, which is not a crime. You know what I mean? That something awful was taking place on a grand scale to these naive kids. And
And
it felt chilling.
yes, it was chilling. I remember glancing over at you and Lisa with like eyes just bulging out of my head. Like it's unbelievable. And just for context, I want to be very mindful not to give any kind of identifying information, but what we're talking about here is like kids who show up at a doctor or a therapist with really serious, complicated problems. And I was kind of tracking themes that I heard as we listened, and I think 7 or 8 families described that it was in fact the therapist who first suggested that maybe this kid is gender dysphoric, or maybe this kid is trans, or perhaps the kid had decided they were trans really like a week before, and the therapist was, without doing any kind of background information or assessment, uh, recommending social transition or medical transition, like very, very quickly. So that is the type of, shocking scandal I think that you and I are talking about. And we hear these stories all the time, but it's like a different thing to be in the same place and to hear parent after parent after parent after parent tell the same story, and you just think, this is going down in the history books.
I
This is
know.
unbelievably scary.
You're so right. There's a couple of things that bring up for me. First of all, I remember when the first parent said, and the therapist brought it up. There was no gender issues, and the therapist brought it up, and I kind of raised my eyebrows, like, "Wow, that's mad, wow." And then we continued on, and then this only had a bit of a group of maybe 35 parents. Then another parent brought it up and said the same thing, and I thought, "Whoa, that's extraordinary." Then a third parent, then a fourth parent.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my god." And like you
Yeah.
say, we counted it. It was about 7 or 8, as far as I remember, who said, yeah, the therapist was the first to bring it up. And that 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 is not right. No matter what's going on, that's not right. But I remember
Yeah.
the first time I did the first GDSN meeting. This would be kind of COVID 2020, March 2020, and it was similar and different, where everybody went around the room and each gave their story. And I had that feeling, it just bang, bang, the same story. My naive kid, lots of time online, very lost, lots of diagnosis. And then the next parent, my naive kid, lots of diagnosis online. And we went around, and I remember I went down afterwards and I was reeling. I was actually kind of dizzy. And I went down to my
Yes.
husband downstairs by the fire going, I've just been through the most intense experience of my life. I can't
Yeah.
believe what's happening. And that's where, like you say, this feeling of something massive on a large scale is taking place and nobody's aware of it because they're not meeting. And then to be in that room in physicality 2 years later, which was March
Yeah.
2022, because COVID got in the way of us meeting before then, and to be in the physicality and like the Zoom and those GDSM meetings, they are very effective and they have their power, but we all know they lose something. Of course they do.
Of course.
It's just like a friendship or, having sex online. It's like, yeah, it's great, but there's better ways. And the physicality of meeting, of being in the room, and everybody, there's a something, you'd nearly get religious about it, but there's a feeling of communion that we all
Yes.
started to get it. That the
Mhm.
parents, we all started to get it, and the feelings of recriminating against the parents, the self-recrimination, felt
Yes.
inappropriate as
Yes.
each parent kept on speaking, because it was like, it's quite clearly not you. It's quite clearly something else is going on here. It's quite clearly
Yeah.
there's a zeitgeist happening that's really impacting a certain type of child.
Yes, for sure. And I hear all the time, because I've, in addition to, these types of retreats and meetings, I've been doing these phone consults for many years now, and it's incredible because sometimes you hear the mother's guilt is just unbelievable, and it comes in every form. So I'll have a mother one day say to me, God, if only I had not gone to work and I had been a stay-at-home mom, we would have had better attachment and this never would have happened. And then later that week, I could talk to another mom that said, she saw me just be nothing but a stay-at-home mom, and maybe she didn't have a positive role model. And if only I had gone to work, this wouldn't have happened. And I always say, let's cut yourself some slack here, because I don't think it's that simple and there's no formula to it. And, you know, for these parents, they're so obviously deeply devoted to doing everything they can to best help their children. And that's not to say that parents are all perfect, right? Because in any human dynamic relationship, there are things that people do might hurt my feelings, or you hurt your kids' feelings sometimes, but these are overall parents that, when you think of the way the medical professionals have treated them, it's so disproportionate. Like, these parents should be given the benefit of the doubt all the time, because these are the kinds of parents who are thoughtful and mindful and have made every decision with a lot of care, and yet that they're treated as though they are bad people who are trying to hinder their child's well-being, and that they don't understand anything about their child, or that they're ignorant, or that, I mean, just every possible kind of disparaging thing you can think. So that is the disproportionality of the way they were treated by professionals, and the kinds of parents that they are, was absolutely striking. It's really palpable to be in that room.
And what I kept on thinking was, imagine your most vulnerable time in your life, the time when you're most at sea, you're most distressed, and your most precious thing, which is your child, is unhappy and dangerously unhappy. And you turn for help. You could not be at your lowest ebb. And you turn for help, and that person negates everything you're saying about your child, and they give you something else. They give you something that just doesn't seem right. It's so hard. And that's where people, did the parent affirm? Did the parent not affirm? And I'm like, oh my God. It's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, because it's like, I could see why you would affirm, and I could see why you wouldn't affirm. And I'm not, some of them said, and I affirmed, and I wish I hadn't affirmed, and la, 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 la. Some of them said, I didn't affirm. And that's where I made my big mistake. I should have affirmed. And they were arriving, sitting in the same room, in pretty much the same state.
Yeah, that's right.
There was real healing in that, because it was like, you could have done cartwheels, you could have affirmed all the way.
Exactly.
Yeah. It didn't feel like that was the divider in whether this worked out or not. And it did feel to me that one very strong common denominator, and I hate to say it because I am a psychotherapist, and I do feel a lack of faith in my industry these days, more than I have felt before, to be honest. But it did feel that the people that these families went to in their time of need didn't help them. Ultimately, that was the most important issue. Of, if I was to say what was one common theme, that was the one that leapt out at us.
Yeah. And I think this is an issue in the broader sense too. I was at an alumni event for my fiance's high school, and we were talking to one of his friends there, and his friend, when he learned that I worked in mental health, said, "Oh, I think what you do is so important. I have a couple of sons, they're teenagers, and their therapist has really helped them." And I said, "Well, I'm glad you found somebody, because I do think there's actually a bit of a kind of a crisis in mental health right now." And he said, "Well, look, I'll be honest." He got quiet. He said, "We cycled through several therapists before we found someone helpful, and they're not dealing with gender issues," right? So I think this is a broader challenge right now, even if you have a kid with more typical teenage issues. Like, I think there was divorce in that family, like normal things. Parents are having a hard time finding effective therapists. But I want to go back to the retreat, because even though there was a lot of intense, painful emotions, I have to say there was also something incredibly life affirming about it, because the parents really bonded and they shared a lot of laughs. And there were so many real friendships that I know were built out of that time together. And there's something about, the wall we all have up when we hold a secret that we don't think people will understand, and it prevents us from connecting. So if you're in a space with other people who totally understand, and you don't have to explain yourself, and you don't have to justify your caution, something happens to where you feel that receptivity in that relationship, and real connection can really start to happen. And I think these parents started building relationships that are going to be really meaningful in their lives and a real sense of support. And I've kept in touch with some of the parents through other projects that I have, and they said, it was amazing to be understood and to feel like I'm not alone anymore. I'm not by myself dealing with this. There's other parents who get it. And of course, it's not like you go back home and all the conflicts or tension in the family are fully resolved, but there's a support system of other parents who you can bounce ideas off of or talk with, or just know that they're there. So there was something really powerful too, in a very positive way. In addition to the catharsis and the sharing of difficult feelings, I think there were some really meaningful connections built.
Yeah, I really felt that, I often wonder what it is that, I bring to being a therapist. And, empathy is one thing, and understanding, when you're understood, when somebody gets it, that's it. It's like
Yeah.
the big work has been done. They get it.
Yeah.
They understand
Yeah.
it. And I think not only did we understand these parents, but they understood each other. And so
Yeah.
we all kind of met in a place of understanding. And that felt really psychologically important. It felt really like this understanding will carry people through their darkest days. And to go back to what we were talking about with therapy, I sometimes think, that guy that said we cycle through a few therapists, it's when you're not being understood, move on. Like if your therapist doesn't understand you, if you feel you're
Yeah.
not understood, it's
Yeah.
very demoralizing. It's actually very, very distressing. And then little groups formed within these parents, which was nice. There was I remember at one stage we were out with s'mores and we were, I don't know,
Yes, we made s'mores on a campfire. It was really
yeah.
fun.
And it was lovely. And I think it was that night. Anyway, one of the nights I came in and I saw all the parents of the boys had just
Oh yeah.
naturally gravitated towards each other and were just chatting in one room, just chatting
Yeah.
and shooting the breeze. And I just thought that is so important. It's
Yeah.
so important that they meet each other. They meet each other in person. They find each other in their own way.
Yeah.
And they learn to kind of exchange just information, exchange kind of insight. There's a lot of people can offer insight that, you just wouldn't think of unless you spoke to
Yeah.
somebody else who was in the same position. So that to me was really nice to see the groups. We did divide some of the sessions into age groups as well. And that was interesting. And I think in the future we'll also, because it was really noticeable that there was some people who'd been in it for years, and the exhaustion, utter exhaustion that came out of
Yeah.
some of those parents, that felt like, oh, how do you keep going?
We hope you're enjoying this episode of our podcast. We work very hard to maintain high quality content for this show, and we're grateful to Rhyme and GenSpect for supporting us.
Rhyme, or Rethink Identity Medicine Ethics, is a non-profit organisation dedicated to improving long-term care for gender-variant individuals. Visit rethinkime.org to learn more.
And GenSpect is an international alliance of parents and professional groups whose aim is to advocate for parents of gender-questioning children and young people.
If you'd like to become a patron, you'll have access to weekly transcripts and special Q&As, and you can join our listener community.
Now back to the show.
There's so many specific needs, and to just kind of provide some context, we split every morning. We did a large plenary session where Lisa, Stella, and I kind of had a couple topics in mind that we spoke about, and then we kind of invited parents to share if they have relevant experiences or thoughts around this. Then we had sessions that were devoted to Q&A, and these were completely open sessions. You could ask any question about anything. And then we had small groups where we divided parents up by the age of their child. And you're right, I think we also, as the facilitators, learned a lot about the needs. And I think you're correct. How long your kid has been questioning their gender is a big one. And I think the needs of parents who have boys are just so incredibly different.
Yeah.
And we had to kind of build some impromptu sessions for parents of boys because we recognized how kind of specific and different and I don't know, just particular their son's experiences were and their needs were. And it is so profoundly different from the girls and the way the girl gender dysphoria shows up. So these are kind of things that we have on our radar as we build more retreats like this in the future. But we learned a lot, and it was really interesting. I wanted to touch on a couple more themes. I'm wondering if there's specific ones that you remember, because I'm thinking about how many parents said she or he has a sibling that takes the air out of the room.
Yeah.
And our kid has kind of been living in the shadows of his sibling or her sibling for many years. And that was interesting. I don't think I expected that.
Yeah.
But a lot of the sibling stuff.
That was really, I think the sibling aspect is fascinating. And what I you know, when you have got a background knowledge and then it's crystallized in the room. That's what that one was, because it's like, I heard that quite often, that the other sibling had a lot of needs, or the other sibling had something that created an awful lot of attention to the other sibling. And this was, Walt Whitman had that phrase, your yawp. This was their kind of, their cry, their kind of, here I am, their kind of announcement.
I always say to parents, it's like, I can have a crisis too, Mom. Check this out. You know, like I can be the star of the show, or I can have a mental health problem. The yawp. I mean, that's a different kind of yawp.
Yeah, but that's exactly what it is. And that was a surprise for me, because I knew it, but I didn't know it. It's the same as knowing that it's a scandal and it's an unfolding medical scandal. I knew it. And then you're in the room and you know it on a much deeper level. And you think, oh my God, this needs to be attended to within the family realm.
Yeah.
And I don't think it gets much attention within the family realm. It becomes very, very individualistic. Something about gender, it's very individual. And it doesn't seem to go with the idea of this is a family situation here. And I don't think many people are. I think Anastasis Poliadis is doing family, but you don't hear very many family therapy oriented situations around gender. And I'd love to see more.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
The parental guilt, you touched on that earlier. That was a big theme. We had parents, you know, and look, some of this is understandable too, right? Because I think all parents are always trying to retroactively problem solve. But parents wondering, like, is it the food that I ate? Is it the kind of care I got or didn't get when I was pregnant? I mean, there were so many micro granular analyses going on of every single decision.
Oh, way back to before conception, what I took and what I ate during pregnancy and what I did during pregnancy. You know what I mean? Right back to that point. And I've a good thorough knowledge of parental guilt myself. And it's
experiential knowledge.
Very good working knowledge of it. And it's just awful, because the world has colluded to add to parental guilt. And yet, honestly, I don't think parents have ever been better. Like, if you compare the other generations of parents, you know what I mean? That, like, we're doing a good deal better than our own parents. And yet we are all party to this. I find it really off-putting. I found it very off-putting when my children were young. We all collude that we're all crap parents together. There's this kind of an awful lot of social media pages and like ha and wine o'clock and all this sort of silly stuff. And it's all like we're all blithering idiots making a mess out of our children, and we're all in it together. And it's like, well, I've never seen better parents generationally.
Yeah.
I've never, you know, like if we give it in the larger sense. So this excessive parental guilt, which, oh my God, was crystallized within the gender sense in the retreat. And it feels, I would love if we all collectively rejected this parental guilt. We're good enough. You know that, was it Donald Winnicott? You know what I mean? The good enough parent. We're good enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the irony is that if you're a parent asking yourself if you're a good enough parent, most likely that means you're quite conscientious about your parenting. Yeah. And ironically, I mean, sadly, I know in different settings I've worked in, and even in the gender world, sometimes you meet families and you're like, oh, this parent could really use more mindfulness around their parenting, but those aren't parents wondering about that question.
No.
So it's almost like it should be a comforting indicator to you.
Yeah.
If you're worried about your parenting, you're probably doing a really good job.
If you're reading parenting books or if you're going to parenting retreats, you're probably in the top 5%, in fairness, in your flawed way, because we're all so flawed. We're all so flawed, and it's so not fair. We're just human, so we bring our flaws to our parenting as much as we bring anything else. It made me sad to see how much parental guilt there was in the retreat, but it made me glad that I did feel actual healing was taking place. I could see in the days as they evolved that the parental guilt reduced. And a feeling of something awful has happened, has been done to our families, started to become more prominent in the general feeling. And that felt, this is really powerful. We're doing something really, I just felt really good about my work as such, about this is a good thing to be involved in.
And another nice counterpoint to that parental guilt was these parents really clearly admired one another, because there were parents were all pretty incredible. They were interesting, intelligent, wonderful people. And so when you're sitting there, you realize, oh, I'm amongst fantastic people. And so I can't possibly be that bad. When it's that aloneness that opens the door for all of these self-directed questions, like, well, why is this happening to our family? What have I done?
Yeah.
But then you go sit in a room with 34 other really wonderful people who are clearly great parents, and this happened to them. So then, you might think, oh, this could have happened to anyone.
Yeah.
It's not my fault, exactly.
A dawning realization came.
Yeah.
A dawning realization. There's no doubt about it that, hang on, if she's really good and she's really good and actually he's very good and he's very engaged and she's very good, well, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Maybe
I'm not utter crap after all.
Yeah. I do think that there's a learning in being with other people and realizing that we're all flawed and that's okay. I think that's very liberating. And I think when we started talking, in the different, whether it was the plenary sessions or the smaller groups, there was again a dawning over the few days of the move from, you can be obsessed with your child and there comes a time where you have to think about yourself.
Yes.
Bring it back to you, because you actually have spent 98% of the last year thinking about them. And that's unbalanced and actually has moved into an unhelpful obsession. And that that came out strong by the second or third day then.
And we also tailored a lot of our small groups to address that very question, because ROGD parents tend to feel solely responsible, particularly because they realize they're not going to get much help from therapists and doctors. So they have this sole burden of trying to be everything to their child, be their therapist, be their friend, be their confidant, be their, wise leader, all these things. And there is a serious requirement to let go and trust the process. Even if you're terrified and your kid's vulnerable, at some point you have to let go and trust that my kid has a foundation. I don't know what's going to happen, but they're going to have to work their way through this. And so we focused a lot of our sessions, especially for teens who are a bit older, around this issue of letting go. There were a lot of specific themes that we incorporated into our conversations that I think were really, really helpful. And self-care and just kind of reconnecting with your own sense of being a human. Like the ROGD parent identity can become just as overwhelming as the trans identity, right? So we talked about expanding your own sense of identity, all these really fantastic themes.
Yeah, because it's so easy to lose yourself when your child has lost themselves, because you follow them and they're lost in the wilderness, and then you have followed them into the wilderness. And you kind of have to. I remember one parent who wasn't at the retreat, but it was such a lovely image. It's always stuck with me. She said, I'm trying to be the lighthouse and they're out in the stormy seas. but it's very easy to get into the boat and get into the stormy seas,
Yeah.
chasing after them.
I know. That's a
Yeah,
great
it
image.
is. It is. It's a
Yeah.
lovely image. I did see that. I did feel that, some of these children had already medicalized, and some of them will medicalize, and
Yeah.
that's okay. It seems to be very likely to happen, and we're going to have to give room to that as a society, and we're going to have to give room for it's quite clearly going to happen. You know what I mean? Just statistically, it was kind of, and I felt that there was an acceptance among the parents about that I don't think would have been there on Sunday afternoon. I think it
Yeah.
emerged over the
Totally.
days, yeah,
Totally.
which I think
And
is really good.
it's necessary because parents were kind of grappling with this question of like, well, I may not think this is best for my kid, but what if my kid decides to live this way? Or what if my kid decides to go down this road? How can I stay present as a parent? And like, what kind of parent do I want to be? Do we
Yeah,
want to be locked in some sort of power struggle about this? Or am I going to meet my kid where they're at? And so, this was an amazing retreat because it was not just parents ranting about things they don't like, which of course there was space for that. But there was also a deliberate focus on how do I grow myself as a parent so I can meet my family's situation? Because this is the reality, right?
yeah,
Reality is very important, and we may not like where things are going, but we have to show up for the
yeah,
people in our lives. And I was really impressed with parents' ability to hold that tension. I mean, that was one of our sessions, was about holding the tension between you personally thinking there's danger in this path and also accepting the reality that this is where my adult child is, for example. So how do we meet them?
yeah,
It was
and
really powerful.
an acceptance that your children, they come through you, but they aren't you, and ultimately they move away from you. And I do think the parents of the older children were coming to that, and
Yeah.
it's inevitable. It's inevitable, and the feeling of the enmeshment of the parents of the younger children versus the kind of we've got to move forward of the
Yeah.
parents of the older. That was very educational for me. That was like, yeah, this is a process
Yeah.
that's been going on for thousands of years. You know what I mean? The
There's a
enmeshment.
developmental
Yeah,
process,
yeah,
not only of the individual, but
yeah,
of the family.
yeah,
Roles change, and
yeah.
your relationships with people change, and with yourself changes.
And when you're a parent of an 8-year-old, all you are is a parent of an 8-year-old. Well, that's how I
Yes,
felt.
yes.
But then when you're a parent of a
Mhm.
28-year-old, you're a person. You're your own person. Yeah. There's lots of other things to you. And I think
Yeah,
something about the parenting of today has made us just walking parents. You say we're not a walking gender identity. Some of us fall into we're just a parent. I'm just a parent. That's what I am. I'm a parent. I'm a living, talking, walking parent. And it's like, actually, we need to build about that. We need to build beyond that.
I love that, Stella, because
Mm.
that makes me think about. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but it does make me think about the activist parents of like little kids. Their whole platform is built around I'm a trans mom,
Oh,
trans kid's mom. And you're so right how identity can trap us in very dangerous ways.
yeah.
I mean, another thing I've been doing in my time off is like reconnecting with the Tao Te Ching, which is the ancient Chinese text, which is really about non-action and
Yeah.
disconnection and separating from identity. And this has been a text that has been a really important part of my kind of philosophical makeup since I was in my 20s. And I revisit it every few years, and it helps me very tremendously. And so just it's interesting for you to talk about identity because that's something that comes up a lot as I think about the Tao. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
Just tell me a little bit about it.
Well, the Tao Te Ching was written by whom this man who might be kind of fictional. This might be a composite text, Lao Tzu, something like 2 or 3 thousand years ago. It's really old text, and it's divided into these kind of short chapters, and it's kind of written like poetry, and it's about following the Tao, which is the way. That's what it means, and it's kind of hard to put into words. It's a bit esoteric, but essentially it's about, the way I interpret it is that there is a natural flow to the way things work. And when we try to be too interventionist about it, it causes unnecessary friction, personally, psychologically, in societies and families. So it's about restraint, and it's about doing less, actually.
Oh,
And
lovely.
I mean, I can't help but think that this is such a powerful philosophy for those struggling with gender dysphoria, because the approach seems to be try all the things, do all the things, do as much as you can, become a different person, do. And yes. And the Tao is really about non-action, and it's about letting things be and accepting and not complacency, but I guess acceptance and contentment. So anyway, this is a philosophy that I think is really powerful for me.
I wrote a little bit about that in my first book, Cotton Wool Kids, which I really do think, I brought a few of my books over to the retreat, and I did say it at some point that, the book I wrote in 2015, these Cotton Wool Kids, who are very much like, these are active, involved, engaged parents who are doing with a capital D. And I remember writing about that, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but the ancient wisdom of the Chinese wisdom of Wu Wei, which is kind of in action, knowing when not to act, knowing when to not, just not do. And it really felt, and I'm completely as guilty of it as anybody else, and I'm more guilty because I wrote a book about it, so I should know better. But the intense drive to do for your children, whether you're driving them to music, which I will be doing later on, or whether you're just always they've got a sore foot, you're fixing their foot. They're sad, you're making them smile. And it's against that. We've moved it into a place where it's against the human condition. Our children will be sad. Our children will be lonely. Our children will be, and we in something about that. Now that I've really got a much bigger understanding of gender, it feels like it's the bigger story that we have been taught. A pill for every ill. We've been taught we need to fix our child's unhappiness. And we need to do it on a societal level. The teachers need to do it, the doctors need to do it, the parents need to do it. And actually the human condition is filled with distress. And I think we lost our way in the midst of it all. And somewhere along the way, the gender thing seems to be very representative of all that.
I'm going to recommend a book to you called The Parents Tao Te Ching, Ancient Advice for Modern Parents by William Martin. I wrote a newsletter built upon one of the chapters of his book, but I think this is right up your alley. This is what you're talking about. It's really great. So let's touch on, first of all, we're planning another retreat. You can't register for it yet, but it's going to be at the end of November this year.
End of October.
Beautiful.
Isn't it?
End of October. Yes. End of October, beginning of November. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here in beautiful Arizona. So we have our location. It's a secret right now, but it's quite beautiful. And,
I can't wait. I've never been to Arizona.
I can't wait.
I've never been to Arizona.
Great.
And it's always had this very kind of romantic, it's such a lovely word, Arizona. And I've always wanted to go there. And I think now that we've done one retreat, I really think we'll know where we're going. I think it'll be I think this is really powerful for parents. I really do. Yeah, for everybody.
So we're going to have a veterans retreat where old friends from the previous retreat can come and kind of deepen their knowledge. We're going to do more targeted, focused things, role playing, practicing, things like that. And then we'll have another kind of tell your story sort of retreat with some of the foundational knowledge that we taught in the first one. So that'll be coming up in the fall. And then in terms of this season of podcasts, we have some brilliant ideas. And so I hope we can just share some of the things that we plan coming up here. we got a really great idea actually from our friend Helena. She's like, why don't you do some episodes for detransitioners? And I said, oh goodness, how have we not? So we're going to have a little series about detransition, and also maybe trans people who feel kind of lost in their transition, or maybe they are content with some aspects, but there are other parts of the transition that have been really hard, and there's really nowhere to voice that. So
yeah, because quite a few detransitioners I've worked with have said, my terrible years or my terrible time was before I made the decision to detransition. It was when I was just lost on my own at night, worrying.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who I was. So whether or not these people detransition or not, I'd love to reach out to people who are unhappy in their transition and just have an episode for them, just to say, here are ways that you might feel better. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it could be
for sure.
a variety of different ways. And as well as that, I think we're going to do an episode on desistance, which is in and of itself quite a serious psychological event that I went through, obviously, as a kid. I'm sure everybody's sick to death of hearing about it. I'm sure I'll give it another cycle for that session, but I won't do too much. But it's a fascinating kind of thing to go through, where you've gone all in, and now you're trying to get the hell out. And it's hard to get out. So, it's hard.
And it's tricky for parents because sometimes they suspect their kid might be desisting, but if they ask them about it, they say they're not desisting. So there's a bit of a paradox here, and I'm sure you can attest to that saving face thing.
Saving face. Horrified at the idea of anybody seeing through what was happening. I just wanted to happen without anybody figuring it out. The ability of
go be a sage on a mountain and desist there, and nobody can watch you.
The human brain to think two conflicting thoughts is just hilarious. I was going to kind of desist, and nobody was going to notice. How is that going to work out, Stella? Really? And I was in the middle of that. I thought I was in the middle of that. It's tragic where the brain leads us. It can bring us to all sorts of places. But one interesting kind of state of the nation, because I'm becoming more and more and more absorbed in what is America? Who is America? What is going on in America? You know what I mean?
What the heck is going on in America?
Yeah, because I do think that an awful lot of the American culture has come over to Europe. And we get versions of it, and then when you unpick it, you're in America, going, "This is where it began." And I had no idea how much countries like Ireland or the UK were impacted.
Yeah. So we have a special episode with a special guest,
a state of the nation, to
help us unpack the state of the nation, especially with some federal rule proposals and Biden taking on the trans kids issue as part of his platform. So there's a lot to unpack there. We are also going to do episodes on siblings. Parents always ask us, how do I talk to my 7-year-old about what his sister's doing? Or my kids are kind of colluding together against us. What do we do? So we're going to talk about siblings. And we want to revisit the topic of autism. I think we gave it a first pass, but I think there are a lot of things I'd like to clarify, or maybe even correct, or just deepen our knowledge. So I really would like to do that again. And we're going to maybe try to get some special guests on for that. So we're very excited for this season.
Yeah. And we'd welcome other people, because parents and listeners and lots of different people do write in with suggestions, and we take them on board very seriously, because a lot of the suggestions are absolutely brilliant, and they really add to our kind of where we're going with this. It does feel like we're in the new chapter of our podcast, and it feels really, really good. I'd like to do an episode something along the lines of the myths that have grown up around gender, and just discuss them, and just so that there was one episode that people could say, well, these are myths, and this is where it's explored.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, great one.
Really good.
Well, we have I like to keep everything recorded in my little Google Drive here, and we have a 34-page document full of episode ideas. So please, if you send ideas our way, know that we look at them, we save all of them, but there's only so much time in a week. So be patient with us, but we really do love hearing from listeners. And if you like short, quick, little nuggets of wisdom. I hope I'm not arrogant to call us, delivering nuggets of wisdom. Our 15-minute Q&As have actually covered a lot of these topics. We've done short episodes on these, but we want to give them a nice, robust pass, including internalized transphobia, which the Erin's covered really well on Transparency Podcast, and I'd love to talk about that with you as well. So we have a lot coming up, and we are so glad to be back.
Yay!
It's really nice to sit here and see Stella again after, last time I saw you was like a hug at the retreat, right? And then you went off.
And it also feels the last time, because I'm sitting out looking at a lovely sunny day, the last time I was talking to you in, podcast context, we were in winter, but certainly in Ireland, I was in winter.
Yes.
Like it's amazing. This 6 weeks has made such a difference to the world. Yeah, it feels like, just to finish, it feels like 2022 is turning into a pivotal year for gender. It feels a lot is going on. This is the year really that I think will be marked as a change happened. And it's an exciting time. It's a harrowing time for many people. And yet I do think if you can hold on, if you're feeling lonely and lost and tired, if you can hold on, I think changes seem to be coming. Realization, awareness seems to be coming.
Thanks for joining us this week on Gender, A Wider Lens. This podcast is sponsored by Rhyme and GenSpect, and listener support means a lot to us. The best way to help is to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Follow us on social media, and if you'd like to become a patron, you'll have access to weekly transcripts of the show, special Q&As, and you can join our listener community. Just go to our Linktree. That's linktr.ee/widerlenspod.
Our discussions are for educational purposes only and are not intended as a substitute for mental health services.